The Bobcats, mostly older rescues, had endured years in a rundown zoo under harsh conditions. They'd been fed dog food and left with little shelter or enrichment. By the time they arrived at the sanctuary, they were frightened, withdrawn, and unsure of humans. Sanctuary worker Maya tried offering slow enrichment, like rabbit fur scent logs and fresh grass, but the traumatized cats avoided everything. Then Maya found something unexpected in a storage room. A giant stuffed bobcat, nearly the size of a small bear. Everything changed when Maya placed it inside their enclosure. One bobcat cautiously approached the giant stuffed bobcat, lingering beside it as if reassured by its presence. And soon the rest of the pack began gathering around it as well, showing their first signs of curiosity and even playfulness. What happened next defied everything wildlife experts believed about traumatized animals. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The first time the cameras caught them arriving, nobody at Cedar Ridge Wildlife Haven spoke for a full minute. Not because they had never seen bobcats before, but because they had never seen bobcats look like that. 4 carriers came off the transport van, and each carrier held a cat that seemed already apologizing. Their ears were pinned, their bodies pulled tight as knots, and their eyes kept sliding away. Even their breathing looked careful, like they feared the air itself might punish them. Maya Harper stood with the intake clipboard pressed against her chest, reading the paperwork twice. License transfer, non-releasable status confirmed. Surrendered from a failing roadside zoo in East Texas. The notes listed diets of dog kibble and occasional chicken, and minimal shelter during storms. There was one line that made her throat tighten more than the rest. Animals exhibit shutdown behavior. Shutdown was the polite word for what trauma did to wild things. It was the stillness that wasn't peace, the quiet that wasn't calm. It was a body surviving by becoming small, by becoming invisible, by becoming unnoticeable. Maya had seen it in foxes pulled from glue traps, in owls after window strikes, in fawns chased by dogs. But seeing it in older bobcats hit differently, because bobcats weren't built for surrender. The sanctuary staff called the group a pack, the way people called any close-knit rescue group a family. Maya knew bobcats were solitary in the wild, each adult preferring its own map of woods and brush. But these 4 had been forced into shared space for years, and they had adapted in the only way they could. They had learned one another's rhythms, one another's distances, one another's warning looks. In captivity, sometimes the only choice was to bond or break. They had names on the paperwork from the zoo, names too cute for what they'd endured. Maya quietly replaced them with something that felt respectful and American, something that didn't sound like a joke. She called the biggest male ranger because his eyes scanned every corner like a guard on patrol. She called the older female June because her face carried that weary, weathered steadiness of late summer. She called the smaller male Puck, not for silliness, but for the way he moved fast and vanished. And she called the last one Mercy, because mercy was what they had needed and never received. The transfer team helped slide the carriers into the quarantine building, where the air stayed warm and clean. Every rule was written on the wall, because at Cedar Ridge, rules weren't red tape, they were safety. Quiet voice, slow movements, no eye contact that lingered, and always a clear exit route for staff. Wildcats didn't owe anyone trust, and Maya never acted like they did. She believed the job was to offer stability and let the animal decide what to do with it. For the first 2 days, the bobcats didn't eat if a human was in the room. Maya would set down the stainless steel bowls, step back behind the line, and wait. She could hear the soft scrape of claws on concrete after she left, the careful approach. By morning, the bowls were empty, but the cats were pressed into the farthest corners again. Their bodies said the same thing over and over. We survived people once. We won't risk it twice. Their medical exams confirmed what the paperwork hinted at without fully admitting. Dental disease from poor diet, scuffed paw pads from pacing on rough surfaces, fur thinned from stress. June had arthritis in her hips, and Ranger's shoulder showed an old injury that never healed right. Mercy's blood work flagged chronic inflammation, the kind that came from years of living on edge. None of it was dramatic in a single moment, but together it told a story of long neglect. Maya tried enrichment slowly, the way she always did with trauma animals. A dangling feather toy stayed untouched, because feathers meant nothing without the freedom to stalk. A scent log with rabbit fur got sniffed once, then avoided like it was a trap. A cardboard box was treated like a suspicious new wall that might move when they didn't expect it. Even fresh grass brought into the enclosure earned only a glance and a retreat. The third night, a thunderstorm rolled across the property, hard and sudden. It was the kind of storm that made trees bow and made older folks remember roofs that once leaked. Maya drove back to the sanctuary at midnight, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. She wasn't required to come in, but she couldn't shake the thought of that old zoo. She couldn't stop imagining these cats with nowhere to hide when the sky went violent. Inside the quarantine building, the Bobcats were silent, but the silence felt wrong. Maya listened and heard only the rain, and then a soft, strained sound like breath caught mid-sob. She followed it to June's corner and saw the older female pressed flat, eyes wide, body shaking. The storm wasn't just noise to her, it was memory, and memory had teeth. Maya didn't enter, didn't rush, didn't reach, because reaching had never helped a wild cat. Instead, she sat on the floor outside the mesh barrier, back against the wall, hands open and still. She spoke in a low voice about nothing important, the way a person talks to keep panic from winning. She told June about the rain in Texas, about old porch swings, about coffee that tastes better in storms. She talked long enough that her voice became just another steady sound among the thunder. And slowly, June's shaking eased into something like tiredness, like a body finally allowed to rest. The next morning, Maya found something she hadn't expected in the corner of the supply room. A giant stuffed bobcat, nearly the size of a small bear, leaned against a shelf of clean towels. Its fur was sun-faded, one ear was slightly bent, and its stitched eyes looked gently amused. A volunteer had donated it for the education room, a harmless prop for school visits. Maya stared at it, then stared at the notes on the clipboard about shut-down behavior. It was silly, and Maya knew it was silly, and yet she couldn't look away. Trauma animals often calmed around predictable shapes, steady objects, things that didn't ask anything from them. Blankets could help sometimes, especially for younger animals, but these bobcats ignored blankets completely. Still, the stuffed bobcat had a weight, a presence, a silhouette that felt familiar in a primitive way. It looked like a cat that would not lunge, not yell, not slam doors, not grab. Maya checked every safety detail before she even considered bringing it inside. No buttons that could be swallowed, no loose plastic parts, no stuffing exposed, no strings. She had the staff stitch and reinforced the seams with heavy thread used for crate covers. She washed it twice to remove perfumes and human home scents that might irritate sensitive noses. Then she let it air out in the sun behind the building, where it smelled like heat and clean dust. When she finally carried the giant stuffed bobcat into the quarantine enclosure, She moved like a shadow. Ranger's head lifted instantly, eyes locked, body stiff, as if a predator had entered. Puck disappeared behind a platform so fast Maya only saw a blur of spotted fur. Mercy flattened, ears pinned, and June stared with that tired, suspicious look of a survivor. Maya set the stuffed bobcat near the center, not too close to any corner, and backed away. For hours, nothing happened. The stuffed bobcat sat like a quiet guest who didn't care if anyone acknowledged it. The real bobcats stayed away, watching, waiting, rehearsing the worst outcomes in their minds. Maya didn't force it, didn't point, didn't coax, because coaxing felt like pressure to animals like these. She simply left it there, then did her chores with the same calm rhythm as always. On the second day, the unexpected happened, and it happened with almost no warning. Mercy, the one who looked most broken by fear, stepped out from her corner at dusk. She walked low, placing each paw like she was crossing thin ice, eyes flicking toward Maya's shadow. Then she stopped beside the giant stuffed bobcat and just stood there, unmoving, breathing. Not sniffing like prey testing, not stalking like a hunter, just standing like someone reaching the edge of herself. Maya watched from outside the mesh, heart steady, face neutral, refusing to make this moment about her. Mercy leaned her shoulder against the stuffed bobcat so slowly it looked like gravity did the work. Her body sank, not collapsing but settling, as if the weight of the day finally had somewhere to go. She turned her head and pressed her cheek into the plush fur, eyes half-lidding. It was the first time Maya had seen any of them look like they weren't bracing for impact. After that, the shift spread through the group like a quiet permission. June approached next, not touching, but circling, nose working, scenting the seams, scenting the air. Ranger came later, shoulders rolling in a guarded walk, jaw clenched as if he hated needing anything. He sniffed once, then twice, then sat a foot away, watching Mercy as though she'd betrayed a rule. Puck stayed hidden longer, but his eyes appeared from behind the platform, curious despite himself. By the end of the week, the pack had formed a strange little routine around the giant thing. They didn't cuddle it the way a house cat might, and they didn't treat it like a toy at first. They treated it like a landmark, something stable in a world that had been nothing but unstable. They ate closer to it, they rested within sight of it, and they stopped flinching at every footstep. Their bodies began to loosen inch by inch, as if someone had finally turned down the alarm system. That was when Maya noticed the detail that broke her heart in a completely new way. Mercy didn't just rest beside the stuffed bobcat. She rested with her head pressed to its chest. Always the chest, always the same spot, like she was listening for something she once remembered. Maya thought about the old zoo, the years of chain link and concrete, the lack of real den space. Then she remembered a note in the intake packet that she had skimmed too quickly. Mercy had been confiscated as a kitten after a roadside photo op operation got shut down. She was too human imprinted to release, passed from facility to facility, never truly belonging anywhere. Somewhere in that early life, there had been warmth, a heartbeat, a body to curl against. And then there had been the abrupt loss of it, the kind of loss animals carry silently. Now, in a clean American sanctuary with rules and kindness, she had found a substitute that asked nothing. Maya made the choice she had avoided making all week. She called Cal Dawson, the sanctuary's oldest volunteer, a retired school custodian with careful hands. Cal had lost his wife the year before, and he showed up at Cedar Ridge like a man rebuilding himself. He fixed latches, mended crate covers, and spoke softly to animals as though they were old friends. When Maya asked if he could help with a strange comfort project, he didn't laugh once. Cal arrived carrying a small, vet-approved warming pad and a battery pack sealed in chew-proof casing. He had read the instructions twice, highlighted the safety warnings, and brought extra zip ties just in case. Together, he and Maya stitched a hidden pocket into the stuffed bobcat's side, deep and reinforced. They placed the warming pad inside, secured the casing, and ensured no cord could be reached. Then Cal sat back and wiped his eyes like dust had gotten into them. But Maya knew better. When they returned the stuffed bobcat to the enclosure that evening, the reaction was immediate. Mercy approached, pressed her head to the chest, and her whole body softened in one long exhale. June, who rarely showed affection, settled behind Mercy with her chin resting on Mercy's back. Ranger sat guard on the platform, eyes scanning the room, but his tail stopped twitching. Even Puck crept out and stretched beside the giant thing, paws kneading the mat like a remembered habit. The giant stuffed bobcat wasn't just a toy anymore. It became a heat source that felt like a den stone warmed by sun, something older than fear. It became a focal point for calm, a predictable center that allowed their nervous systems to uncoil. And it became, in a way nobody expected, the bridge that made real rehabilitation possible. Because once the cats could rest, they could finally begin to heal. Over the next month, Maya introduced new changes so slowly they almost didn't register. She moved feeding bowls by inches, encouraging them to choose braver distances without ever forcing it. She added elevated shelves with soft traction mats, so older joints like June's could climb safely. She introduced scent trails that started near the stuffed bobcat, so Curiosity had a safe home base. And she practiced presence, standing quietly nearby while they ate, letting them decide she was not a threat. There were setbacks, because there were always setbacks with animals carrying old damage. A slammed truck door outside one afternoon sent Ranger lunging into a corner, panting hard. A new staff member walked too fast near the mesh, and Mercy stopped eating for 12 hours. A hawk screeched overhead, and Puck vanished for a full day behind the platforms. Each time, Maya returned to the basics: slow, predictable, gentle, and never taking fear personally. Then came the day of the first voluntary crate training, the moment every sanctuary worker hopes for. Non-releasable bobcats still needed vet checks, vaccinations, and occasional medical care, especially older ones. But forcing a terrified cat into a crate could undo weeks of progress in a single wrestling match. Maya set an open crate near the giant stuffed bobcat and placed a small food reward inside. She backed away and waited, the way rehabbers learn to wait like it's a sacred skill. Ranger approached first because Ranger always felt responsible for doing the dangerous thing. He sniffed the crate, looked at Maya, then looked at the stuffed bobcat like it was giving him courage. He stepped inside with stiff legs, grabbed the food, and stepped back out, unharmed and surprised. Maya didn't celebrate, didn't clap, didn't make a big deal that might spook him. She simply whispered, "Good," like a soft leaf falling, and Ranger's eyes didn't harden. June followed, slower, hips creaking, but steady. Mercy took longer, but she kept her shoulder pressed to the giant stuffed bobcat between attempts. And Puck, the last one, finally darted in and out so fast it looked like a trick of light. By nightfall, all four had entered the crate voluntarily at least once. A process that could have taken months had begun, because something in them finally believed in safety. Cal watched some of those sessions from the hallway, leaning on his cane like it was part of him. He never asked to go inside the enclosure, never tried to be the hero of the story. He just wanted to see them live differently than they had lived before. One afternoon, Maya found him in the workshop sewing another thick seam into the stuffed bobcat's flank. He said, without looking up, that fixing something felt better than remembering what couldn't be fixed. The heart-wrenching part of this rescue didn't disappear, even as the cats improved. Sometimes late at night, Maya would review the old photos sent with the legal transfer. The zoo enclosure had been bare, sun-scorched, with a dented water tub and no real shade. In one image, June's coat looked dull, and Mercy's eyes looked like they had already left her body. Maya would close the file and sit with the weight of it, because pretending it didn't hurt felt wrong. The unexpected twist came in early spring, when the sanctuary received a call from Texas Parks and Wildlife. A closed case was being reviewed, and they needed to confirm the identity of a bobcat from a seizure years ago. Maya pulled Mercy's microchip record and froze when she saw the original intake details. Mercy had been taken from a photo op facility that also housed a female bobcat used for breeding displays. That female had disappeared from records after the raid, listed only as deceased during transport. No further notes. Maya didn't know why that information hit her so hard until she looked at Mercy again. Mercy's habit of pressing her cheek to the stuffed bobcat's chest wasn't random comfort anymore. It was a kitten memory, a body memory, the echo of a mother whose warmth vanished without explanation. Maya felt anger rise, hot and ugly, not because nature was cruel, but because people had been. And she felt a deeper tenderness too, because Mercy had still chosen to keep living. Maya told Cal the next morning, careful with her words, respectful of his grief. Cal listened, nodding slowly, then said something that made Maya's eyes burn. He said that sometimes the world takes the one thing that made a life make sense, and it does it fast. He said the only answer he had found was to build a safer place anyway, even while missing someone. Then he patted the stuffed bobcat's ear like it was an old friend and went back to sewing. By summer, Cedar Ridge moved the bobcats from quarantine into a large wooded habitat. It had native grasses, climbing logs, shaded platforms, and den boxes tucked like secrets behind brush. Maya didn't put the stuffed bobcat in immediately, because she wanted to see how they handled space. For the first hour, they explored cautiously, paws testing soil, noses tasting real air, eyes tracking sunlight. Then Mercy paced back toward the gate, searching, not panicked, but purposeful, like she was looking for home base. Maya understood and brought the giant stuffed bobcat into the habitat that evening. She placed it in the largest den box on clean straw, with the warming pad safely sealed inside. Mercy entered first, then June, then Puck, and finally Ranger, who sat at the doorway like a sentry. From outside, Maya could hear the soft rustle of bodies settling, the sound of animals finally resting. It wasn't a miracle, and it didn't erase the past, but it was the closest thing to peace she'd seen. The elderly visitors who toured Cedar Ridge later that year often stopped at the viewing window longest. They would watch the bobcats lounging on platforms, coats gleaming, muscles relaxed, eyes half closed in sun. They would listen as Maya explained why the sanctuary didn't allow touching, why wild meant wild, always. Then she would point gently toward the den box and mention the giant thing that helped them adjust. People would smile at the idea, but many of them would also swallow hard because they understood comfort. One crisp morning near the end of the year, something small happened that meant everything. Maya stood by the mesh, holding a medical chart, when Mercy approached closer than she ever had. Mercy didn't rub the fence or beg like a pet because she wasn't a pet and never would be. She simply paused, looked at Maya and blinked slowly once, the way wild cats sometimes do when calm. Then she turned and walked back toward the den, tail level, body loose, unafraid of being seen. Maya didn't move for a moment, letting the feeling settle without grabbing at it. Trust in wildlife rehabilitation is never possession, never ownership, never something you demand. It's a thin, precious thread the animal offers when the environment finally feels safe enough. And Mercy had offered it in the only way that mattered, by choosing peace in Maya's presence. For a rehabber, that was the heartwarming ending, the quiet kind that lasts. Later that day, Cal sat on the bench outside the habitat, watching Ranger bask in the sun. Maya brought him a cup of coffee and didn't say much, because Cal didn't need speeches. After a while, Cal nodded toward the den box and said he never thought a stuffed animal could matter. Then he added, almost to himself, that sometimes the biggest comfort is simply something that stays. In the golden light, with bobcats resting and fear no longer ruling their bodies, he finally smiled like a man returning home.